It was a mid-November morning. It was November 14th, 2013. This is before I had Bree, no babies, I had a cat at the time. The cat actually plays a very important role in this story. I woke up extraordinarily hot. Now, it's a mid-November morning. I like to sleep in the cold. I want the windows cracked open, the air turned down, and I woke up sweating. I heard people outside yelling. I could hear noise coming from my bathroom. I had actually thought the cat got stuck in the bathtub, like knocking the drain around. That's what it sounded like. And then when I rolled over, I knew I had to fix the air. I had to get the cat to stop. I had to get the noise to stop, or I was never going to go to sleep. So I roll over and I see that the sliding glass door of the bathtub is shut. And I was like, this cat has gotten itself stuck in the bathtub. So I walk into the hallway, and that's where I turn and I see it. There are flames coming over the top of my living room door, and I just froze.
My name is Richard Eberly, and I was actually the children's pastor here at that church from, I think, 2011 through 2014. It's November 14th. I got up really early, and I was I think I got up to the church close to like 6:30 or 7 o'clock. Like, I had a lot on my plate. There was a lot going on, and I was like, man, I got to get some work done. I came invigorated. But as I was driving up Kill Avenue, I was the only person on Kill Avenue that morning. And it was, I don't even remember what was going on today. It was a brisk, cool morning. I do remember that. I had a toboggan on and a good flannel shirt and my cowboy boots on. It was a good day. Like, it was and I had a hot cup of coffee. Like, great. I was like, man, this is going to be a good day. But as I was driving up Kill, I'll never forget it. I just noticed that there was some smoke coming up. As I was coming out, I was like, man, like that. And literally my thought was this: that ain't a leaf fire, because leaf fire ain't that black. Like, it was like black smoke. And as I was pulling into the church, I literally just remember sensing the Holy Spirit saying, hey, go check it out. And in my mind, I was like, I got a lot to do today, but I was like, okay. And I drove around to the back of the church, and this was before all this remodel stuff had been done here. And I knew that there were apartments in the back. And as I kept driving back in the parking lot, I was like, man, that's coming from these apartments. And so I pull on back, I get out of my car. I'm not like in a hurry or rush, because honestly, I'm like, just think I'm going to go watch a show. Like, but as I pull out, and I'll never forget this, there used to be a gate there that, like, people used to come through all the time. And I'll never forget Scott saying that people used to criticize him for not closing that gate. But he says, we leave that gate open for a reason. And like, even if that was for the reason yesterday, because if I would have had to like make an effort to get over that fence that day, I probably wouldn't have done it. If it would have given me an excuse, I probably would have, because there were vines everywhere. Anyways, I'll never forget though, I walk around the corner, and then I saw it, and then it came real to me, because I didn't hear any sirens. I recognized I was the first person on this scene, and this wasn't like a little cute little fire. Like, this fire's blazing out of this like octagon-shaped apartment, coming out of the top, black smoke. There's not a siren inside. I don't hear nothing. It's a quiet morning. I'm expecting some sort of like people out there watching. No one's there. Everybody's asleep. And in that moment, I don't even remember what happened. It happened so fast, but I remember picking up my phone, dialing 911, my name is Richard. There's a fire in some apartments behind that church on Kill Avenue. Someone needs to get here fast. And, and then I hung up the phone and I said, well, that's it. That's all I can do. And in that moment, I didn't hear the audible voice of God, but I sensed in my spirit, God said, no. You've got to do something. And in that moment, it seemed like an eternity, but I had this like deep, hard conversation with the Lord in my mind, because I was like, that's a fire. I'm not trained. I haven't been through fire safety rescue school. I don't have a ladder. Like, all these things kept going through my mind. I was like, I can't do this. I've got things to do. And then I'll never forget hearing the whisper, didn't you expect me to use you today? And from that moment on, moved. Like I just went. I remember running, sprinting as fast as I can. I'm yelling. I just remember sprinting to this fire's blazing out the top center section in between these two apartments. And I'm like, how do these people not know like there's a fire going on? And so I went straight to this one door, and I'll never forget. Like, here's the other thing I'll remember, the conversation that was in my head that I think is important, because I wish I could tell you like I was like excited to do this, but I just remember thinking I could get hurt. This could cost me something. And I just remember the Lord really convicted me. Again, I didn't hear an audible voice, but there was this moment, this gut check of just like, are you going to make this about you, or is this about somebody else? Like the line where it says in C.S. Lewis writes in like Chronicles of Narnia, when they're asking about the lion, like who's a representation of Christ, and they ask, is he safe? And I'll never forget the beavers kind of like chuckle and laugh, like, no, he's not safe, but he's good. And it was just in that moment, you just had to decide, is it about me? Am I going to be willing to put myself on the line? Or not, or just watch these people who were not going to get out of this place and kind of burn. And so it was just like, all right, Lord, like, here's an adventure. But also too, there's that passage of scripture that I think I didn't read it that day, but I was in that passage of scripture probably within the last month leading up to that moment, where it says in 2 Chronicles, the eyes of the Lord range to and fro throughout the whole earth, searching to show himself strong on the behalf of those whose hearts are fully committed to him. And I think it was just in one of those moments where you just saw the Lord, like, he showed himself strong, that it was just a moment to say, all right, I'm going to be available to be used. I ain't got no training. I don't have a ladder, but I ran to this first door, and I'll never forget it. As I was about to approach this first door, a big chunk of wood with fire, like almost like took my head and shoulder off. And my heart is racing. And I remember yelling and pounding on the door and just started beating doors and windows on the first floor. And I wish I remembered her name. I can still see her face. This older woman on the bottom floor opened up the door, and I'll never forget the face she made at me. She had this scowl, and then her eyes saw what was happening, and she like ran out, and all she was saying is, oh my gosh, oh my gosh, oh my gosh. And I just remember I was in like urgency, and I looked at her, and she just kept saying that. I said, lady, I need you to shut up. Is there anybody else in the building? Like, anybody else in your room? And she's like, nah, you know.
And that's when I start hearing people yelling. They're like, Kellyanne, you have to come here. And I go over to the window, and I'm like, you have got to jump. Now, you can see it in these people's eyes. They're like, you have to jump now. And of course, I don't see the entire deck is like covered in flames. It was no small little porch fire. There was no way out. It was through a window. And I was not okay with that.
And at that moment, as she's talking to me, I think it was Kellyanne, like who lived right above this lady, opened up her window. I don't remember all the dialogue or how long this went. I just remember looking at her and said, hey, you're going to have to jump, and I'm going to catch you. And she was like, I can't do it.
They're like, we'll catch you, just let go. And so I took a deep breath in. I thought, I hear sirens coming. I don't have to call 911. There are people here. Do I call my dad and tell him what's going on? All these thoughts go through my head. People are screaming, you got to jump now.
Looking back, this is kind of funny. I just remember looking at her, serious as can be, and I was like, if you don't jump, then you're going to die. I was like, this needs to be very direct, and things need to happen. But in that moment, I'm like, I just told her to jump, and I'm going to catch her. I have a lady who's got her remote in her hand, still freaking out, having like a panic attack in her robe behind me. And Kellyanne was like up there, I can't jump. I was like, well, you're going to die if not, and I'm going to catch you, jump. And I'm like, how am I going to do this? But I also look back again. You just see parts of this where the Lord provides, like out of nowhere, a man in a off-white, stained up, tight white tank top and some SpongeBob pajama pants comes running up. And I just remember looking at the guy, like I didn't even ask his name. He was like, what do I need to do? I just said, hey, you need to brace yourself like a man. We're going to catch this girl. She's going to jump out the window. So get ready.
I started looking around for my cat, and then that's when I was like, okay, I got to jump. We're going to do this. And so I kind of slid out the window, and I'm just like hanging from this window, unsure to let go, because I just know I'm going to break every bone on the way down. And I swore I heard somebody say, let go, and just hit my foot. And they were like, we have you.
And I just remember we're like, jump, jump, jump. And she jumped. And I remember she kind of like was climbing out, caught the window, hanging there. And I was like, you need to let go. You know, it's urgent. And in that moment she did. She fell down. We caught her. And, you know, I can't imagine the emotions of like being inside of that, thinking like, there's no way I'm getting out. And so
I trusted and I let go. And these men were down there and they caught me, and I broke a phone. I ended up with some bruised arm.
I didn't have time to have a conversation with her. I just looked at her. I said, is anybody else in the building? You know, and I didn't know about the top, I guess, would it be right corner, that someone was in there, and there was no way we could get up to the top. Like, you weren't climbing up those stairs. The fire at this time was really blazing and getting in there. And I just remember her saying, there are kids in that other bottom floor. And like, I just sprinted around the back. I don't remember what I was thinking. My heart was just beating, and I was like, I got to get in there and wake them up. Because at this point, I couldn't even get to their front door because the fire had moved over to kind of that part. It was just too hard. And I just go around the back, and I remember pressing my fingers up against the glass. And thankfully, I guess, I'd like to say it's because I'm really strong, but I think really but who am I kidding? I think the window was unlocked, and I remember flinging it open and grabbing and ripping out the curtain and yelling inside of there. This time there had been a few other people. The fire trucks hadn't shown up yet. A few other people kind of came around back, and we were yelling, and they're like, yelling, they're in there. I was like, we got to get in. Like, and if I'm like a toddler size, so I had to I could barely climb up there. I wear a beard for a reason, but I just remember I said, hey, we got to go in there. And like, go in. The guy was like, go in there. I was like, yeah. They're like, I don't think they're in there. I was like, this door is closed, and we just see a kid's room. We don't know if someone's trapped in another room and can't get out. And so I just remember going in there, ripping open the door, and just trying to hurry as fast as I could, screaming, is anybody in here? Is anybody in here? And looking around, and thank God no one was in there. We ended up getting out, and as I got out of that apartment through that window again, we come back around. At that top point, we're coming back around, the fire department starts to show up. And man, praise God for the city of Sherwood and the men and women that do this every single day. They showed up, and man, then we just heard that there was still a lady in that top room, and all we knew to do at that moment was like pray. At this point, I remember getting around. There was like a really big there's a big crowd, and then too we were just like praying and just looking at people, grabbing and saying, hey, there's still somebody in there, we need to pray, and we were grabbing people and telling them to pray. And man, I hate that I'm going blank on her name right now, but the lady that was on the bottom floor, she just like came up to me and got right in my face, and I'm like, man, like I'm still like, now it's kicking in, my adrenaline's come down, I'm kind of getting emotional, because you're just like, holy cow, what just happened? Like, you start to realize all the other factors that could have happened within that, and people could have died and or been burnt, like just the thought of all of it.
So when you went and knocked on doors, did you ever knock on the doors on the second floor where Kellyanne was?
No, I couldn't get to it.
Couldn't get to her floor?
Not at all. Could not get to her floor. At that moment, I think there might be some pictures, but like you couldn't get up that staircase at all.
And there was nobody else knocking on doors besides you at that time.
There was nobody out in that entire apartment complex. It was like everybody's asleep. It was silent. Now, I yelled loud enough, I hope, to wake everybody up. Like I was screaming at the top of my lungs.
Sure.
Just out of like fear, it was intense, man. Like, I don't want to, I hope no one ever has to kind of walk through something like
absolutely. That. Okay. So when you get outside the window,
yes,
and you're hanging there, when you feel someone touch your foot, which there's no way they could touch your foot.
Yeah, no way they could.
They're like, they're still a mile below you, seems
Definitely.
like. And they say, we got you. You hear this voice that says, we got you.
Yeah.
We've got you. Come on, we've got you. Is that just what you needed courage-wise for you to be able to take the
For
jump?
sure. I mean, I probably would have hung there until the fire department brought a ladder and they were like, hey, here, why don't you climb down on this? But I don't know. I felt comfortable knowing I was close enough to the ground that they could touch my foot.
Absolutely. Let me ask you this. When Kellyanne, when she came out the window and she was hanging there, were you able to touch her and say, hey, you come on, tap her on the leg or anything like that?
Scott, I'm like 5'9". Like no, like she was dangling there. Like she was on the second story, of an apartment complex.
Yeah.
There was no way. Like there was still, even with her dangling, there's still a pretty good little gap she had to trust to let go for us to kind of catch her and fall. Like I'm very glad that there was another person. I don't care who it is. Like the force of somebody coming down was like, we were both gonna hit the ground, if she let go, and it was just me trying to catch her,
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, it was intriguing, and I'll tell you about it now. I didn't want to tell you before we talked, but one of the things she said was that what woke her up was somebody just kept tapping on her door and just kept tapping and knocking and knocking. And that's what woke her up. And she said, when I woke up, she said, I went to the front door, and she said the flames were coming across the top of the front door. She said, but it was just, she said, somebody was knocking on the front door. And I was like, who is at my door? She said, it wasn't like a crazy, but it was just like they were just tapping on the front door, just knocking. And the other thing she said was when she hung out the window, she said she's hanging out the window by her hands. She said I was halfway out. She said I was on my stomach. I hadn't pulled all the way out to where my hands. I was on my stomach hanging out the window. And she said I was still debating in my mind, am I going to go ahead and go all the way out and drop? And she said that's when she said one of y'all, she said I felt them tap me on my leg and go, hey, we got you. Come on, we got you. It's fine. She said, and it was like y'all were. She said they were right there. She said so. What gave me the courage to go on out the window and jump was because they were. I realized, you know what? It's not as far as I thought. She said because I couldn't see behind me. She said so, but when they reached up and tapped me on the leg and said, hey, we got you right here. Come on, we got you. And she said it was as if you were right there beside me. She said so. I was like, oh, it's not very far. She said so. When I went out the window, she said what gave me the courage to go. She said because I was fixing to climb back in. And she said I was just going to take my chances in the apartment. She said, but that tap on the leg at that moment, and I was like, that's solid.
Man, that's the hand of God, man. That's all that you can say on that, man.
That's right.
Man, wow. You don't know. That's like, wow. I have no clue.
I know. So one of the things that's most intriguing is Richard, who is one of the first people to see the fire, and he's the one who frantically runs around the building, knocking on the doors, waking people up, going, oh my gosh, the building's on fire.
Yeah.
He was the children's pastor of the church right across the road, which incidentally, we'll find out that Richard actually came to work early that morning just because he had some stuff he wanted to get done, and he saw the smoke and decided to come over after he'd prayed a prayer. It's kind of an interesting story. But Richard's the children's director at that church. Now, today, what do you do?
I am the children's director at that church, which is pretty crazy to think about the fact that he literally saved the person who was eventually going to take his position.
How incredible. Now, at that time, would you have ever seen yourself as someone who was going to do children's ministry?
No, I waited tables. I was up until 2 a.m. 7, 8 o'clock in the morning was incredibly early for me. Now I think I regularly wake up at like 5 o'clock in the morning. So I would say my life is 180% different than it was back then.
That's awesome. So let me say this. How did the experience with the fire and the rescue and Richard being involved with that and the church being involved, how did that change your perspective of church, and what did that do to your walk with God?
Oh gosh, it pushed me into church. I am one of those people who needs a big sign and a great push and a big ask, and I got all those things. To see community come together, not just the church, but the people in the apartment. They didn't know me, but they were bringing slippers and jackets and sweatshirts and laundry baskets so that the fire department could save what they could. And even the church, I mean, they checked on me for weeks after that. Just, hey, we just wanted to see how you were. And there was no more sneaking in the back row because people knew me, and it was, hey, what are you doing? Let's get involved. Let's share your story, which took like 8 years to do, but
but you're doing it. And it's
but
so
I'm
good.
doing it,
and it's so good. And you found out you were pregnant just a few months after that,
just
right?
a few months after that. So the fire happened in November. I found out I was pregnant in February or March. So just right after that.
How exciting!
And then moved right back into the same apartment and everything after it got rebuilt.
Go figure that. So right now, as the children's director at that church, you manage about how many volunteers and how many kids?
Oh gosh, with students that volunteer with us, there's probably about 50 or 60 volunteers, and in any given week, 100 to 300 kids that roll through our doors.
Wow. So you go from a waitress who's possibly going to be a school teacher or something like that.
Yes. Struggling through school, not really sure what I wanted to do.
Experiencing a fire and a rescue, and today you are a children's director over hundreds of people, hundreds of kids, and cool stuff going on.
Whole life change.
How cool is that? Kellyanne, thank you for sharing your story. This is incredible. Thank you.